Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kouryer Podcast. Today's episode is episode 208 with Jovaughn Trammell. He's a filmmaker and digital creator from Chicago, United States. And of course, before we jump into all the questions of the podcast, I'm just going to quickly mention that in the for contact section of the captions down below, you can check the ID to his Instagram account, the link to his website to see his diverse portfolio of different things he worked on, and also definitely his YouTube channel, because we're going to talk about that as well. And I actually found his social media presence through his recommendation on my YouTube, so which of course we'll talk about that specific video as well. And well, with this quick introduction out of the way, how are we doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me on, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. And is that the bike you use to go around the town, actually, in your room?
Yeah, it is. It's a electric. It's called the Juiced Scrambler. It's an electric bike. It kind of resembles a little mini bike, but it's really fun to whip around town. Yeah.
Do you need license for those in there, or is it the case just like a bicycle?
No, it's you can just, as long as it has pedals and it has pedal assist, they legally allow you to use bike lanes and stuff like that. So you don't need a license.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So let's jump into the first signature question of the podcast, which is give us a little introduction on how you got into the world of basically design and art and just, these creative fields that you're, working in.
Yeah. So I've been doing video production for a while now. When I was a kid, I was big into skateboarding. So I was always skateboarding with friends and whatnot. And then eventually I had a friend film a video clip of me skateboarding, of me eating it. I ate shit and fell on the ground. But for some reason, even though I was embarrassed, it was such a cool video clip that I was like, man, I need to get a camera. So I bought my first camera. Or actually, my parents bought my first camera. And then I just started filming and editing my friends skateboarding. And then I learned through Sony Vegas and Pinnacle Studio. And I started a YouTube channel where I just uploaded the clips and whatnot. And then just from there, I went to film school, and then I wanted to be a cinematographer at first, and then I got more into directing, and now I just do all things video production, mainly directing and post-production, and now I'm into 3D animation with Blender, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting topic, how the technology is changing the pipelines of different stuff, because if you could imagine, maybe not just even I wouldn't say 20 years ago, let's just even say 10 years ago or 7-8 years ago. I mean, of course you would get people who would use 3D softwares in their pipeline of replicating different shots and effects they would want, but before that, it's kind of an interesting concept, because back in the day when they didn't have all this different softwares and features, they had to get really creative with every effect they wanted in front of a shot. So but now that we have everything available, it's kind of unintentionally losing that kind of creative juice, because when you're in need of something and there's not a feature for it, your brain starts to get really creative for that, to make it find a solution for that certain effect. And what do you think about that? Actually, what do you think about that concept? How is the future going in that sense for creativity?
I mean, it's definitely one of those things where it's in the 80s and 90s, or even way before then. Visual effects have always been part of movies and storytelling, but they just had more creative ways. I literally actually just rewatched The Terminator 1 last night, and I was kind of blown away. I'm like, oh, they're using stop motion animation in order to bring this robot to life. And again, it was one of those things where it's just well, that's kind of what they had to do. They couldn't just churn it up in a computer using CG. And so I do wish we could embed more of that sort of creative thinking into modern day workflow. And I think a lot of people do. But so often with big blockbusters, it's very easy to just lean right into whoa, that's just going to be CG. That's going to be 3D animation. We don't really need to consider a creative way to pull this off. But there's filmmakers that are still doing it. Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was a movie that I think they use a lot of creative techniques in order to get a unique look and pull off visual effects. And it has a sort of music video feel. And it's not photo real, but it's stylish in a way that's really cool. We see that from Into the Spider-Verse. We see that from a bunch of creators online. And that's kind of one thing that I would like to do more of, is like creative thinking, creative workflows. And, with AI tools, especially, those are growing so quickly that I think more of that stuff will start to happen again.
Yeah, definitely. But I kind of, I was kind of also thinking about this topic as well. And I think personally, one of the ways that, people who are even making courses right now on, different stuff, for tutorials on programs or just anything, texturing, any discipline, I think a really good strategy would be for anyone who's learning anything is to always have that fundamental mindset and perspective on doing things. Okay, what do you mean by that? For example, all right, let me explain. For example, you have a scene, a 3D scene, right, and you want to have a textured lighting for it. For example, like using
Yep.
gobos, basically.
Mhm.
But before you, for example, give your teach your students, how to use gobos, you could maybe first give them a task to see how they can, manage to make this effect. All right, maybe someone takes a plane, cuts some holes and shapes in it, and extrudes it a bit, bevels the edges so it makes it smooth, and it kind of replicates what it is, but it actually isn't. After a lot of these type of experimentation, then you can at the end say, all right, you can use gobo, because at first, if you, for example, teach them how to do this the easy way, like or maybe even use a modifier, they won't really start to think about solving problems in their projects
Right.
later on. It's about having that mindset of trying to find new ways to do things. And I think that's really, really important, especially for beginners, to also, okay, you learn this, cool trick, in Blender or other softwares or something, try to also find other ways to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's something that we see a lot from the Blender community in general, I think. Like, when it comes to like these larger, more traditional 3D software, software companies in general, you're learning from in a very traditional process. Whether it's you went to school or you had an apprenticeship and now you work at a big company, they're teaching you very specific things of like, this is how we do this is how we do that, until like the next iteration of tech advancements comes. It's like they have a very specific pipeline in the way they do it, which is awesome for efficiency. And I'm not trying to hate on that in any way, but I think one of the things that has drawn me to Blender a little bit is that like it's a bunch of amateurs using an open source free software, and then you just get all these weird creatives that are just like trying stuff, and they're like, hey, did you know you could do this with geometry nodes? And everyone's like, oh shit, that's fucking cool, like let me see that, let me try it. So I kind of like that aspect about Blender, and people keep making weird add-ons and stuff where it's infused with AI or whatever. So I mean, yeah, I think I agree with you where it's like, let someone learn and experiment before just teaching them the right way, sort of.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of the different learning different disciplines, you've also have under your belt experience in a bunch of fields, which of course we kind of talked about it briefly by now, like directing videos, sound and editing, 3D and VFX, and of course cinematography. And from all of this, which ones do you, out of all of this, which one do you mostly specialize in a lot? Like, which one is your strongest suit, basically?
Ooh, that's a hard. I mean, definitely more post production stuff where it's editing, or like I said, 3D animation. But honestly, nowadays, if I'm on set and producing, it's or doing production, it's mainly directing. I for my company, I direct a lot of stuff for the most part, or I'll just help out wherever I can. I mean, cinematography is the thing that's probably fallen the most to the side, that I let someone else handle, or that I'm not brought onto a project to handle cinematography. It's mainly directing or post production.
All right. And let's see. Let's talk about actually the video that I found you with, actually, which is, of course, the link of the video is also in the description down below for anyone who wants to watch it as well. It's titled "Making an Expensive Beverage Commercial Using Blender." Well, you kind of, in that video, you showed us, in a sense, how does the structure of your pipeline looks like when you're getting a commission and you want to work on it, but like, is there anything else you can tell us that you haven't touched on in that video? Like, basically, outside that, could you again, like, explain to us, basically how does the structure of a pipeline looks like whenever you want to start working on a project, basically?
Something like that. Yeah, I mean, it definitely starts with discussions with the client. Sort of like, what's the idea? What's the concept? What do they want from this? And sort of developing a look, basically. So like right away, it was kind of like, all right, we want to go tropical. This is a beverage about watermelon, and we're doing a sort of summer release sort of thing, and so we want to go tropical. And then it just comes with ideas. What sort of visual ideas do you have? We know we want to go. One thing that was pitched very early on was going inside the can, and then coming out the side or coming out the back, and a scene, sort of a beautiful island, a tropical paradise. So that was kind of the mellow water one. The Liquid Death one was a different mindset, where it was just me looking at Liquid Death's branding, which is like death metal, save the environment, but trying to make water kind of badass. And so I was just like, well, they kind of already have used a grotesque killer character before, so I'll play off of that, and maybe I could subvert expectations by I do a lot of like comedic work, a lot of like comedy sketches, a lot of comedic commercials. So I was kind of thinking about like, what if I set up like what was meant to be a normal, beautiful beverage commercial that just has these beauty shots, and then death rips into reality and flips everything on its head. And it was just like, oh, that's kind of an interesting approach to a commercial. So those were the kind of two different mindsets. Is like, one is very client based, and then one is more like, what's just funny and interesting and fun to do,
Yeah, and speaking of actually getting clients and commissions and just freelancing, there's a couple of different interesting subjects that I think we can touch on as well. One of them, which I've been recently actually researching about, is how to determine basically your price of work for commissions. To how to determine that usually. How do you do that? What is your process of that?
That is something I'm terrible at. I'm kind of a little bit new to the freelancing game, so I'm not the greatest at like coming up with prices. I mean, from what I've learned from my friends that are freelancers, and just what I've seen, is like, go higher, before, and then give them a chance to sort of retort. And what I mean, the greatest thing you can always do is just to understand what their budget is. Because the thing is, most people, I think, can work within a budget. It's just more people telling you like what they can do within a budget. So it's like the difference between $1,000 and $10,000. It's like, I might be able to do something for you for $1,000, but if I'm only going to put 1 or 2 days of work in it, rather than 10,000. We can open it up much more. So yeah, it's more about like understanding their budget. And if they, every single time I talk with a client, it always ends up like you're in this like Mexican standoff, or this sort of moment where you're like, well, how much is it? He's like, well, what's your budget? It's like, and you can't really get past that. So if you do have to give a number, I think it's much better to just go higher, and then let them talk you down from it potentially. I think I run into issues a lot where I go high and then people just don't respond after that, because they don't know how to like politely say like, that's a little too much. And they just sort of like, I'll find someone else to do it. And that's one of those things where if you really need the job, that's a more difficult decision. I'm kind of in a position where I'm like, if you say no, I mean, I'm fine with that. I'll just move on and keep moving. So that has helped me a little bit, is not feeling like I'm desperate for it,
Yeah, definitely. And the reason I actually started with this question is because there's another Blender YouTuber, shout out to Smeef, Smeaf. Actually, I might link his with the exact video I'm talking about in the description as well. He exactly talked about this specific thing that he was going through. Apparently, he got commissioned by I forgot the country, it was a country in Eastern Europe, for actually a beverage commercial, actually, like you. Mm-hmm. And they asked him, for the price, and he didn't know at the time, how to basically determine the price. So he said $3,000 USD, right? $3,000. But apparently he made a huge mistake, which actually he then later on explained in the video. He said he should have went for $10,000, because when you're determining your price, you need to also take into consideration the amount of time you're using the devices you're working on, all the GPUs you're using for rendering, all this stuff you need to take in account for those. But I mean, especially for beginners, because usually when you want to start taking commissions and freelance, you're super excited, you want to get that first commission, so you're kind of willing to lower your standards. But at the same time, if you were good enough to be chosen, and they want you to do their work, you have to realize that you're also in the same position to also determine your price well as well, and
Yeah.
Well, of course, it's always, especially with creatives and artists, most of us aren't the most outgoing, extroverted people.
Yeah.
Generally, that's why it's kind of, sometimes it could be intimidating when it comes to dealing with clients and stuff like that. But yeah, just
Yeah.
just go be more bolder and braver with your pricing, I guess. And
Yeah. I mean,
because
for sure.
yeah, definitely. And another thing I need to add on is, I think it's kind of, this point is actually an observation of mine. Your competition right now for anyone who's in Europe or USA or basically first world country is not just with the people in your country, as well as with the whole world right now when it comes to freelancing. Because the thing you might not do for $1,000 and it's going to take you a week, someone else in Bangladesh or Turkey or Iran will take it for $500, and it's going to actually be more profitable for them because of their economy. True story.
Yeah.
I live in Turkey. I'm from Iran. I know this stuff. I have a lot of friends who freelance. And yeah, you can easily get hustled out of those jobs as well. Like, you just look at Fiverr when you have the freelancing websites out there. But there's another good news, which is another also observation of mine. So it's basically an anecdote, all right? But correct me if I'm wrong, by the way.
Okay.
Like, if you really develop a style in whatever you do, you will always stand out. I know that sounds so cliche and just duh moments, but it's so true. Like, I have friends who were disappointed, and they were like, oh, the market is too saturated, for example, for character art, and after a while, they decided to start, a style as a sculpting of characters, and after a while they developed wait, what was the word? I forgot. Basically, they developed like a talent for color picking, basically good color composition and stuff like that, and that really made his work stood out, and he got clients from Twitter, for example. So basically, and another point is, most people don't really think like that. Most people go through the same tutorials that everyone does. Rarely, actually, the amount of people who put in a lot of work to develop their style is not that much. So if you're willing to make a plan for yourself and put in the work, you can definitely easily beat out all our competition in whatever you do. So yeah, there's that as well. And
Yeah.
it's not just in art, it's in anything. This is what I've seen throughout my life, actually. And what do you
Yeah.
think
No, I
about
buy
that?
that. I buy that. I mean, that makes sense to me. I mean, you definitely. I think I haven't been doing 3D animation for very long, but a lot of the time, I get comments or people in real life that tell me like, "How did you learn this so quickly? Like, it doesn't seem like you've been doing it that long, and you learn." And I think a big part of it is, one, I already had like a filmmaking background, so I had sort of a compositing tricks or an understanding of how cameras and light work, which helps a lot in 3D, where it's like, how do you get your animation to feel cinematic? It's like, well, I understand lighting already. I already understand camera movement. And so that helps a lot. But it's one of those things where I watch tutorials and then I immediately throw away the project that they're sort of giving you. You don't want to just, I've seen people that go, and I'm not hating on anyone. They will go and they'll make like a Ducky 3D animation, and then they'll post it on Instagram, which is fine to do as you're learning. But it's like, eventually you have to develop, like, what do you want to make? I'm constantly just in search of what are the tools. I already know what I want to make. I just need to understand the tools to help me make it. Right. So it's like, some people don't have that mindset, or they don't have that ability just yet, and they'll get there. But right now they're just like, I just want to learn 3D animation. Like, if your starting point is like, I want to make 3D animations, like, you'll probably go down more just like making whatever someone's teaching you to make. If your mindset is like, I want to make this specific story, then all of a sudden 3D animation just becomes a tool, for you to make that. So it's like kind of a switching of a mindset. But it's something that everybody goes through. I mean, yeah, everyone's got to learn in some ways. I would just say, like, as soon as you can, just divert paths from what you're learning and immediately start to like develop your own thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's, by the way, just one quick side note. I was also one of those people who made Ducky 3D animations and posted on Instagram, by the way. I'm guilty as charged.
Yeah, I'm calling you out. No.
No worries. And the thing is, actually, you're totally right, because for me, I don't want to get into my story. People who are frequent listeners of the podcast, so you know my background. But for a while, like 2-3 years ago, I wasn't really into 3D. It's been just a year that I've been like trying to seriously pursue 3D and just developing my skills, and I'm still doing that. But about 2-3 years ago, I think I was just curious, to do like the donut tutorial. I know, like whatever. And it was for Blender 2.8. And let me tell you something. I don't know, because I also have really bad ADHD, so I really didn't give it much effort, So after like the first part and a half, I kind of dropped it. But of course, I eventually finally did it last year for the third version of it, to get that off my list. But the thing that really helped me a lot for starting out with Blender and 3D was last year, I didn't start with the donut tutorial. That donut tutorial was actually my second project. My first project was I had a doodle of some silly, simple doodles of spaceships in Photoshop, and I was like, it would be interesting if I could, 3D model that. And basically, it's kind of like unintentional, like a mindset shift, as you mentioned. It's kind of like, instead of having this mindset of, oh, I'm going to watch this tutorial and be delusional about the fact that I have achieved something. No, honestly, if you don't apply those things, it doesn't matter at all. If you don't have your projects at the side, it doesn't matter at all. And let me tell you something. I didn't start with any tutorials. I was just like, I'm going to make this. I'm going to Google every single thing I need to learn in order to make this. And through doing that, making that spaceship, I learned a lot. I mean, the renders were horrendous in the end, still, because it was my first project. But I learned a lot of basics and different stuff, in just having that mindset, which, was pretty interesting, having that mindset. Like it goes with everything. For example, maybe you want to make, I don't know, like a small multiplayer game for you and your friend. It's just a gun and a grapple hook. And your first question is, all right, how to make games? Everyone is saying pick an engine. So, you need to pick an engine. All right, Unity and Unreal or other stuff. So you go through these searches and questions, and it's kind of like a researching mindset that you kind of know what steps to take to make this. It's kind of obvious if you apply like basic logic, what's the next step is, and you need to research on how to implement that. So everything else becomes a tool. So I totally agree with what you said, just having that mindset change when it comes to learning stuff. And just for anything, even for texturing, for example, if you want to become an asset artist or environment artist, this is like my example. That's the role I'm trying to feeling hopeful in the future in the game industry. It's like, all right, I have this little environment in my head. I did some sketches, and this world in my head, so I'm just trying to make a scene out of that. So in order to do that, I need to learn how to like make terrain. I need to learn how to texture properly. So in order to texture properly, I need to UV unwrap well. So when you apply that during all this stuff, you start to learn it all compounds, basically, all that knowledge. And after doing projects like that, you will improve much faster than just getting tutorials. That, of course, tutorials are great, don't get me wrong, but it's about the mindset, not the tutorials. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, definitely. Because you get to a point where, like, pretty quickly early on, you can get to a point where you're not just watching tutorials. It's like once you learn the basics of modeling and the basics of lighting and rendering, it just becomes like you're just poking around the internet just to fill the holes in your knowledge a little bit, rather than sitting down and watching a whole 45-minute tutorial. You just start to like, all right, I can do 90% of this on my own. Let me just figure out why isn't this one thing working, So yeah, and like I said, everyone goes through that sort of beginning phase of just watching tutorials. You have to, and that's why the donut tutorial is the best, because he's not just teaching you how to make a donut because that's the most satisfying render to make. He's teaching you how to make a donut because he teaches you all the basics you need to make other stuff as well. So, yeah, I mean, learning is a weird thing, but having that goal in your head of what you really want to do or what you really want to make will drive you to like get through those tutorials, get through the learning phase, or you're always learning, but get through the early learning phase and like really start to become the artist you want to. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's actually, now that I think about it, that's literally, I think, the most important thing when it comes to improving anything, having a focused goal. And
Yeah.
of course, that goal always changes because once you reach it, there must be another. There, you will always find another goal. It never ends. But because the reason I say that is because you have artists who, for example, they do daily practices for years and years, and their art hasn't improved a lot. They're kind of like on autopilot. Because a good analogy I can give is like, imagine you're in the middle of the ocean with your boat, and you're just rowing endlessly. You're rowing for years. Where did you get? Nowhere, because you don't have any direction. But when you have a direction, you can, progress much faster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's a great analogy. You need to find which way you want to go because there's 1,000 things you can do in Blender or any other 3D software or any software in general. Is like, there's people that are just great modelers. There's people that are just good at like making isometric, cute little scenes. There's 1,000 different things. There's people that are just geometry node wizards. And so you have to like learn, do all the learning. And then once you've built up your sort of island of knowledge, it's like, then you can start to think about which way do I want to go.
Yeah. And what are you most excited about learning later on in the future when it comes to 3D?
I want to learn how to just make stuff faster. But I'm trying to think about specifics. So like I always, again, I have ideas for short films, worlds, that sort of thing. And so I'm just like it's a little daunting to sort of jump into like, well, where do I start? How do I make that? Character animation is the hardest thing in the world to me. So I would like to just make short films. However, I can make it happen. And right now I'm working on like workflows and pipelines to like, how can I make a 3D animation that has a unique style that's not like a ripoff of like Pixar, or on the other side, a ripoff of like Into the Spider-Verse, like trying to find a character animation / design workflow that isn't too fully 2D or fully 3D and doesn't give you that uncanny valley feel, and sort of like, so I can then make short films with characters, right? So I'm working on that. As far as like actual technicals of what I'd like to learn, I mean, I've rigging and a character animation, like I said, was definitely something I'm just now starting to get into. I just learned like proper weight painting and like really getting into like rigging, and just dealing with all that. One of the things I really am inspired by, or somebody who I'm really inspired by, is Alberto Mielgo. He does like the Love, Death, and Robots, the Witness episode, and he's done a few other things that if you saw his style, you would probably immediately recognize it. He was one of the creative directors, I think, on Into the Spider-Verse, actually. But I really like the way he does cloth, the really like chaotic layers of cloth and whatnot. And I've recently found out that that's like really difficult to do in Blender. So I've been trying to figure out a decent workflow in Blender to try to get that done, but it's very hard. So yeah, just more clothing, more complex character clothing design and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's probably, a lot of, useful add-ons you can, later on browsing. Just by going on Gumroad, there's a lot of Blender add-ons you can always find. But to be honest, I think, by the way, I'm not a VFX guy at all, but from what I've heard, I guess for those heavy, like really super nice, physics simulations and stuff like that, people usually use Houdini, I think.
Yeah, Houdini and Marvelous Designer is the big cloth.
Yeah, for cloth, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that's what they used for a lot of his films, is that they've worked in Marvelous Designer for that sort of character animation pipeline. So yeah, that might be something. Maybe I'll try to dabble in that, or try to find an add-on or something like that. But yeah, I at this point I just want to finish a short film. I want to finish a project and like something I'm proud of that I can actually put out.
Yeah, and don't forget to put it in the title, the logo of Blender, and in the title, Blender short film, because that's going to spike the views a lot, honestly.
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah,
I know,
just
you always
Blender
got
short
to do
film.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a meme at some point, but it's also a nice thing as well. You know how like active the community is. To be honest, like I'm not complaining or anything.
No, yeah, I mean, it's nuts. It's and like once you start to watch one Blender short film, it's like every single one like gets recommended to you. Um, so yeah, it's definitely fascinating. And I mean, that's the weird thing about Blender is like there's no gatekeepers, there's no barrier for entry, so it's just like everyone's doing it. Like I kind of got into 3D because I felt this like weird insecurity in a way because I was like everyone on TikTok and Instagram can now prove that they can put together like stylish edits and like film cool things with their phone flipped upside down, and they're doing all this weird shit. And it kind of made me feel weird where I'm like, well, if everyone can do my job, like it's kind of not that fun anymore. And so I went into 3D animation a little bit, almost to just like diversify. And now, since obviously since Blender's just so open and free, it's like, well, now everyone can do Blender too. So it's like I got to switch again. I'm going to the top. I'm going to the hardest software to learn. Maybe Houdini.
Yeah, like actually, Houdini. Everyone's afraid of Houdini. They say it's the hardest to learn when it comes, different in comparison to other softwares. But I don't know. I've never tried it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Unreal Engine is something that's always
yeah.
been kind of interesting to me. Like just to see UE5 and see like what's his name? Sava? I forget his name, but he's a guy that does Unreal Engine like short films, and they're like mind blowing. They're cinematic. They're very close to being photoreal, but they're all like real time. So he can like choose his angles live while like recording the whole sort of scene. So that's really fascinating to me. But Unreal Engine is just a whole nother leap to like now I have to learn that, and I'm only a couple of years into my Blender journey.
Oh, nice. So, how long you've been using Blender, by the way?
Yeah, I think about a few years now, like 2 years on and off, 2.5 years. I used Blender for about like 4 months, and then somebody at my job told me that I should use Cinema 4D because it's the industry standard. And so I switched to Cinema 4D for like another 6 months, and then I came back to Blender because Cinema 4D is kind of expensive, and it's I just felt like Blender already had everything I needed, sort of. And for Cinema 4D, in order to get it to where Blender was at, I was going to have to pay like $150 a month. So it was just one. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And all right, who are some of your favorite artists and designers and creators who inspired you a lot, actually?
Yeah. Let's see. I'm very inspired by filmmakers for sure, like more traditional live action filmmakers. David Fincher is one of my favorite. Like, I really love thrillers, so he's great. Obviously, Quentin Tarantino, big fan. The Daniels, especially now that they've done Everything Everywhere All at Once. Jordan Peele, a lot of filmmakers like that. But in reality, I'm just like inspired by movies and then any sort of unique styled animation. I thought Into the Spider-Verse was like one of the best things I've ever seen. Again, Alberto Mielgo, like his stuff is like really inspiring to me. And then just one-off random like graphic artists that do more. I can't even name names because I'm just so bad with names, but just like charcoal artists or graphic designers that or illustrators that do a really graphic style. I'll just follow random people on Instagram, but I don't remember their name because I'm a bad person. But yeah. Ian Hubert was like one of the first artists in Blender that really inspired me because I think maybe we have a similar mindset where like he's all about cutting corners. And I think a big fear of mine is when I got into Blender and I learned about UV unwrapping. I'm like, God damn, why can't this just be, I just want to make a thing. And now I've got to figure out what this UV shit is. And then to know like, oh, you can actually project this and do this and get away with this. And like, he opened up my mind to like just having a different thought process towards 3D animation of like, are you trying to make this asset to give it to another person so that they can use it in very specific ways in their video game or their visual effects pipeline? It's like, no, I'm just trying to make shit for myself. It's like, well, then you can cut corners. You topology to the UVs, but forget it. Let's just make something. So he kind of opened my mind a little bit to like just being more like, hey, just always go for the goal, which is like the short film. Go for, you're trying to make something. You're not trying to become the best modeler, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, speaking of your YouTube channel, right now, if you could give some of your best tips from your experience, on doing YouTube and just video editing, just editing and YouTube in general, what are some of your top tips and suggestions you can give to anyone who might be interested in making videos?
Making videos, I mean, trim any sort of fat you can off the video. Now, granted, I say that, but I think there's a lot of YouTubers that are wildly successful and they don't do this. So at some point, I think your audience starts to like you enough that they're willing to just sit and watch you ramble for 2 hours and they'll find it entertaining. But for me, I still like really value people's time. And so I just try to trim the fat off of everything. It's like, why dead air? Like you see so many times in YouTube videos these days where it's like the first 60 seconds is like the YouTuber like adjusting their camera and their microphone and like, oh, hair, let me get, it's like, why is this in the video? What is going on here? So trim the fat. If you want, write some stuff so that you can really understand what the points you're trying to get to right away rather than like rambling. Make it, be honest, be transparent. That's something I'm still trying to work on, is I think being authentic and being transparent is going to be far more valuable than having like, I said trim the fat, but now it's like you're trying to find this balance of like polish and authenticity. I think one of the things that like traditional TV has is like polish, but it doesn't have this authenticity. To me, when I watch two YouTubers talking about something that's sort of dramatic, it's more dramatic to me than like traditional reality shows are, because it just feels like, oh, there's not perfect camera work, and they're like, the lighting isn't great. It's like don't worry so much about the production value, worry about getting your message directly to the viewer, with sort of no barriers in the way. You're just trying to, it's like direct A to B, accomplish what you came to accomplish a little bit. So yeah, like production value doesn't matter. If you have like an iPhone in your pocket or an Android phone in your pocket, you pretty much have all the tools you need to like make a good video.
All right, awesome. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it? I mean, of course, if the NDA is not in the way of you answering this question.
Yeah, the NDA that I have with myself. The right now I have two sort of short films I'm trying to work on. One is a horror comedy short film that was meant to be live action. It was meant to be a live action short film that I potentially made with the company that I work for. Like a 15-minute short that had to do with Karens and college students, and it was sort of like a horror comedy thing. That is now potentially being turned into an animated short film. So I've been doing a lot of testing for like the character pipeline, trying to get a unique style, trying to make something that feels like artful and not just like a traditional sort of like Pixar character. And so I've just been working on that, and I'm writing right now, revisioning, right? The original script was like 15, 16 pages, and it's like, that's a long time for a single person to make a animated short film. So now I'm trying to get it down to like 4 or 5 pages. So that's the main thing. I have some other projects that I've wrapped up on that I want to make breakdowns, just like my beverage commercials, and I would post those to YouTube. And then I just wrote a quick sort of action scene that I would like to animate. That's like going to be 60 seconds that I would like to make as well.
All right. And all right, aside all this talks of 3D and VFX and editing and digital art and all this stuff aside, is there any other like hobbies or ambitions or any other stuff you want to pursue later on in the future that is like unrelated to what you're doing?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am a big, I really like kayaking. I would like to get like really, really into kayaking. I would love to take up, I see this is, you mentioned ADHD. This is me. I'm like, I want to do some archery. I would love to, learn to, um, you ever heard of a one wheel?
Oh yeah, actually I did. I saw a video on YouTube for some guy who's trying to travel around the world with one of those one wheel bicycle things, I guess.
Yeah. So I have a one wheel over here, but I have
Oh,
there's another one that's called like an electric unicycle. Maybe learn one of those. I'd like to buy a car in the future and just drive all around the United States. I'd love to camp more. Play some airsoft. I don't know. There's a lot I would like to do.
all right. Awesome. And all right, we reached the last question and section of the podcast, which is called Time Capsule. And well, I think I can guess, it kind of what it is. But basically, let me explain. Basically, this have imagine this like the all right, how should I say it? Imagine the rest of this recording is going to be put in a hard drive and a time capsule basically for the future, and
Okay.
people are going to listen to it in the future. So to anyone who might listen to this part of the podcast in the future, what do you have to say? It doesn't have to be, it just has to be something from a human to another human being, like authentically and genuinely. It's not about art or anything. It could be about art if you want, but
Yeah.
yeah, what do you have to say?
So speaking to the masses, is that kind of the, or speaking to
Yeah.
a future self?
No, masses in
Oh,
the
the
future.
masses.
Yeah, yes.
Um, don't fuck it up. We got a decent thing going. The Earth has been pretty cool so far. I'd like to keep it going. I hope climate change is in a better area. I hope we are. I'm a little bit of an optimist, so I imagine things are going just fine. So I'll say like just be happy, keep it going, be nice to each other. Hopefully, there's just more empathy in the world. I hopefully AI hasn't taken over everything. Concept artists, or maybe they don't even exist anymore. But yeah, I don't know. Like, it's so hard to think of like what to say to the masses in the future. I don't know.
I think the thing you're struggling with is you don't want it to be cliche or something, but actually it's fine. If your answer is cliche, it's fine. Don't worry about that. Because that's what the common thing everyone has problems with. They don't want to be cliche.
It is trying to make it cliche, is like dream big and live life.
Eat your
and
vegetables. Yeah.
Eat your vegetables. So it's like now I'm talking to future children. Is that what's happening? You know what? Mental health is really important out there. Keep your mind strong. I think right now we're kind of living in an era where social media and the internet has messed everything up. And, I think there's been showcases of a spike in anxiety and depression because of the internet and social media. And I hope that's gotten better. But I have a feeling that the world has only gotten more divisive and more broken up and more anxious because of these sort of social media platforms. I don't know. Maybe my hope is that like we find a better balance in the future, I guess.
Yeah, the major thing about this is that people put the highlights of their life, not even the highlights, exaggerated highlights of their life, mostly on social media. So like the thing is, if you're really good at something, you're going to work on it for a couple of years. Listen, all those fames that some people subconsciously want to get on social media, that social media clout or anything in their field, you could get it even in one day if your quality is good. The only thing you need to just focus on is quality, because like quality is a real authentic thing. You can't bullshit that, and you see it all the time, people trying to just fabricate and engineer success, and they only see it as metrics on social media, especially these days, which is kind of like sad. Just you're not behind or left out or anything. I don't know, if you want to start anything you want, if you're 30, 40, it really doesn't matter. I guess I can understand, of course, and sympathize, why it would feel depressing and sad and overwhelming to start. But if you put all the comparisons aside, yeah, it's never late to do anything, honestly.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something, it's easier said than done as well, because it's like,
Exactly,
I've
yeah.
struggled with that. I've struggled with that for so long. Is where it's like, you see people that are talented, but maybe you feel like, I've done stuff like that, or I'm on that same level, but they have a million followers and I don't. And it just feels like, well, it's unfair that, maybe in some specific areas I have I have a stronger skill set than they do, but no one's paying attention to me. So I mean, it's hard. I've definitely struggled with that for a while, because now everything has turned into a content game. It's like, in the past, it was like there was gatekeepers. You had to do what you had to do, and then the gatekeeper said, "You're in. You're good enough. Join us to make this movie, or join us to join our company, or whatever." But now the walls have come down. There's less gatekeepers, and so you can start yourself, which is great. But now what happens is people find ways to find success, and so now there's this feeling left of like, well, it's not as if I'm being shut out by gatekeepers. It's like I'm just literally not good enough. That's what your mind tells you, is like, because there's no gatekeepers anymore. The only person to blame is myself. And so it's hard. It's really, really difficult. And I don't know. I still struggle with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally see what you mean by that, but I mean, there's so many variables at hand, and in the end, like, I genuinely believe this, that quality always speaks in the end, because there's a lot of reasons that, for example, let's say a trend could pop off and, someone get famous out of it or something, let's say we're talking about content creation and art right now, for example, and like, I've known someone who, like, since 4 or 5 years ago, has started working on voxel art, 3D voxel art, and tried to niche in on that. And at the time, no one cared about voxel art that much. No one really, it wasn't popular at all. And then, like, 2-3 years ago, when the NFT boom happened, in early 2021, she basically became one of the top artists in the world right now with her environments in voxel art, amazing environments. Her name is Mad America on Twitter and Instagram. And she started 4 or 5 years ago without even knowing that this would happen. No one knew her at all. No one cared about her. But then she's now the face of voxel art, in a sense.
Wow. Yeah. It can happen like that. I mean, the thing is, you have to sort of just make whatever you want to make for the fun of making it. If you sit there and you're toiling over, how do I get more followers? How do I get bigger? How do I do that? It's like, well, then you're not going to you have to enjoy the process, because at that point, you're not really focused on the process or the fun of creating. You're focused on success. And
and that ruins
again,
it.
easier said than done.
It's kind of like an interesting concept, because I was also watching a YouTube video about it. It's like they ask Olympic gold medalist of, I guess, sharpshooting. I guess that's a discipline in Olympic. And they asked her, what did you do to, and apparently she was having problem with her shoulders and stuff. And she was like, I wasn't worried or anything about the outcome. I was just focusing on the leaf flowing there. Like, the point is to just, when it comes to performing, to be in the flow of what you're doing, being present. And let me try to translate it and how to translate it to the content creation and art game. Let me give you another example. Someone who's actually coming on the podcast 2 days later, and someone who I've actually become friends with for a couple of months now, Omar Farouk Tafsif. I hope I didn't butcher his name. He's an artist from Bangladesh. And here's the thing: his not only niche, his main niche is hand-painted, stylized textures in Blender. And no one knew him for a long time, and because that's what his niche was, in the stylized textures. He very slowly started to make it a little bit of following. But then, I don't know if you know this artist No Verrier on Twitter. He does oil painting of modern subjects, like, I don't know, a Big Mac with some flowers or something,
I don't think so.
Yeah, his paintings are really famous, like a classic beautiful oil painting, for example, of a grilled cheese sandwich, subjects you wouldn't see in that medium, kind of like that. And he made, and the artist I mentioned before, he made the scene in Blender. He basically took the 2D reference and made it 3D. and tagged Noah Verrier. And Noah Verrier on Instagram has 100K followers or something, And Noah Verrier saw that and decided to do a collaboration with him to make his pieces into 3D NFTs. And he's like, doing really well, actually. And he
Yeah.
wouldn't have gone here if he didn't just pursue what he loved and he was passionate about,
Yeah.
Because I think that's
Definitely.
where the maximum amount of creativity lies, just doing what you love and try to develop that skill. And sooner or later, you will see results. Maybe it takes 8 months, 8 days, 8 years, but you're only worried about and anxious about that because we're in the social media age and everyone's constantly, every day, every second, posting their huge achievements and, their 6-figure businesses and, their travels and or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, it's weird. I'm definitely one of those people. There was a long time where I couldn't go on Instagram because I was just like, I don't want to see everyone else succeeding. I don't want to see peers or just like people I don't know, like doing what I want to do. It felt like, well, it not that I was like jealous or angry at them. It was just like made me depressed, So it's hard. And as soon as you get into a flow state of making or creating and doing what makes you happy, all that stuff can sort of melt away because you're doing what you love. And so the validation sort of starts to melt away as long as you're still in it. And also, like, I think one thing that tricks people too, and has tricked me, is like we see so often from like millionaires and billionaires this idea or this thing that they put out there, which is like, from when I was a kid, I wanted to be this, and then I grinded every day until here. And it's like 99.9% of humans don't like spend their entire lives doing wanting one thing and then eventually succeeding in it. It's like it's always a sort of wavy path to where you end up. It's extremely, extremely, extremely rare to be like, I always wanted to be an actor, and then 20 years later I was an actor. It's very hard. So that is one thing that like I think tricks people is they see like an Elon Musk and they're like, oh man, like that's what I want to be, and then they just spend their lives thinking that that's what they're going to be, and it's like, well, that's not really. You can't just like say you're going to hope to be one thing and then spend 99% of your life trying to accomplish that and expect it to be exactly how you thought it was going to be, or it's going to go exactly how you thought it was going to go. It's just not realistic. It's expectations ruin your reality if you have just ridiculous expectations, I guess. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you kind of brushed up on a really interesting point. It's just if you, like, for example, you're picking up I'm just saying this a random thing. For example, you're someone new who you picked up 3D art, you picked up Blender or something, and sure, this is going to be a chapter of your life, whether you become successful. By successful, that's like a tricky definition as well. Let's define successful as a lot of social media followers and constant commissions and stuff like that. Let's say that's successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether you get that or not, if you focus on doing and making what you love, whether you win or lose, you kind of win in the end. Because sure, it didn't pan out the way you wanted, but at least you worked on the things you liked,
Right.
you know?
You're
And
winning.
yeah,
Just by creating the things you love, you're winning.
exactly. And what's more greater than than someone seeing you create what you love and they want you to make something similar for them. Now that's winning, and that only happens, and that really only happens when you really explore and try to develop your own style and like implement and try to express your creativity and perspectives into your works. That only happens that way. So just focus on quality and just doing what you love, and it's just a matter of time. Yeah, that's about it, I think.
Yeah. Social media is a weird game. Social media like begs people to sort of be experts in everything too. Like, and again, like someone could paint me as this obviously because I'm doing breakdowns on Blender, like I know what I'm talking about. But I'll see sometimes I'll go on TikTok and it's just like, what's up? I'm a 19-year-old director. And it's like, what? Like It's like it's obviously it's great to like have that confidence and like work on whatever you want, but it's a weird thing. We all remember 19 being 19 and how like dumb we were, and how like not on our feet we were, sort of. So it's very weird when all of social media is just like, I'm 20 years old and I'm a full-time filmmaker, and it's just like
Entrepreneur, dropshipping millionaire.
yeah, exactly. It's just like what is going on? No one. It's just not realistic for 99.9% of humans. So
There's a lot of different things, variables going on in life. I mean, I 100% agree. By the way, you mentioned angry and jealousy. That's actually a healthy thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, like if we feel that. And I mean, it will become unhealthy if we try to do unhealthy stuff after. That's a different subject. But
yeah,
what I'm trying to say is, oh my god, I think I'm forgetting. Jesus, I actually want to say something really important related to this. My ADHD brain is forgetting.
it was just going to be so profound.
No, wait. God damn it, I forgot it. All right, yeah, whatever. I don't think it'll come back, because if you try, if I try to focus more, it just won't. Yeah, this is weird. Yeah. All right, do you have anything else to add on this?
I don't think so. I mean, like you said, eat your vegetables. Stay safe, stay sharp. Always keep learning. Stay curious. Yeah.
But I remembered what I wanted to say about the whole teenage, success stories. Actually, it's interesting because of how technology is available these days. That's why we get a lot of those really advanced, and well developed, people in their fields at a very young age. You see this in every discipline, not just art. Like there are 16, 17 years old working in companies right now. Actually, like legit. Not even like trying to pretend or anything. Like, and I think it's an amazing thing, but you need to also pay attention to how was it possible for them to develop this fast in a situation they probably didn't. I don't know. I'm not saying this is just an hypothesis, but usually if you don't go through that much stress or there's not that much barriers and obstacles in your life, there's like kind of the foundation for you to grow really fast. So everyone's life is different. Everyone's life is, they have different obstacles and problems in their life, and all of this play a role in how fast, you can get to where you want, and like, I'm really lucky enough that I have a roof above my head, at least I'm somewhere I have internet, I can record podcasts. If I was, I don't know, born in Afghanistan or some other country, I wouldn't even think of that. That was impossible. Yeah. So yeah, the point is to first get out of survival mode psychologically. Then that's when you can actually grow and develop. And I promise you, this is like my personal anecdote. Like 99% of those kids that you see, they are like huge successes in the early age, and they pop off a lot. They kind of had a good foundation and probably been raised in good environments that they really didn't go through that deep stress that messed them up. Because that's how you develop fast. That's like basic psychology, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to add something to that?
No. I was just gonna say, like you were saying, get out of survival mode. Like all of this it's weird to think about. Like all of this what we're talking about is also from like a place of privilege where we can do this. So it's like I get to spend most of my time making stuff. It's like that's already on its own a unique thing that not most people get to do. So that already itself is like a great privilege, sort of. But yeah.
All right. So it was a really fun episode. Thank you so much for coming by the way. And where can people contact you if they had any questions or anything they wanted to ask you? Is Instagram okay?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, by the way. At JV Trammell is my Instagram handle. JVTRAMMELL.
Caption of the episode as well. People can find it pretty easily.
Oh, yeah. So, Instagram, or you can go to my website, Jovaughn.tv, if you want to like reach out, like specifically more business wise. Otherwise, on my YouTube channel, I'm posting tutorials, breakdowns, just behind, not really tutorials, but just behind the scenes of like the stuff that I'm making. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. Thanks again for coming by, and thanks to anyone who tuned in and listened to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, if there's any comments or suggestions or critiques, leave them down in the captions down below. I'm sorry, not captions, comments down below. And till next episode, stay safe, everyone. Take care, and bye.
Thanks.